I'm Jose Garcia, one of the hosts, and thank you everyone for coming. I know some people are gonna start trickling in over the next minute. Ekanjali, thank you again for hosting this event with me. I didn't scare you off last time.
Not at all, no.
And I'm going to confess to everybody, I'm a little bit nervous, and I'm a little bit so I had an agenda, and I'm going to try and stick to it. But I'm kind of we were talking about this before we came on. A lot of people are like, "Oh, are you going to talk about what happened yesterday, and then what happened today in the EU Parliament?" They're all talking about health AI, and I'm like, I don't need this right now. I have an agenda, and it's not what I wanted to cover. But we are going to touch upon it, and I'm just letting people know we're going to maybe we might address it at the top of it. We're going to maybe get into that towards the end. We're going to go 15 minutes over, basically, so we can answer those questions that still also cover the agenda that we came here to talk about as well. Does that sound weird? I don't know. What do you think about it, Dave? Did you see the announcement yesterday, Ekanjali?
Yes, absolutely. And, I think this is a really important time for this subject around health AI, user trust, and social currency. So very topical. And of course, let's take a moment to reflect on the backdrop against which we are having this conversation. And prior to yesterday, even we've seen nurses strike across Northern California with AI emerging as a key concern. So we have to highlight a crucial reality for all of us, which is trust is not a given, it's earned. And for AI to succeed in healthcare, we have to go beyond the technological advancement and focus on credibility and social currency with all of those individuals that interacted with these systems daily. Don't you think, Jose?
Well, yes. I actually, you know what? I always get nervous when people ask me questions, Ekanjali.
Yeah, well, hopefully with the speakers, we'll be diving deep into what it actually takes to foster that trust.
But
And
I can actually say people are switched on about this, and not just people in healthcare. I was at a New Year's Eve party, and when people found out, oh, he's involved in some way in healthcare and AI, people are coming up to me. They're saying, "What are you doing to make sure this is being developed ethically, Jose?" Not what's amazing new technology, what are your predictions for the future? They're asking me, they're cornering me and saying, this is all great, but you're going to do this ethically, right? And I'm like, well, I just do webinars, but I'll try. And people are pointed about it. They weren't aggressive, but they're bringing it up. I'm not bringing it up, right? I'm not saying, hey, I'm the health AI guy. Talk to me about the subject. They're finding out that I do that, and then they'll raise the subject with me. So it's and I've also got I talked to a lot of people, and I won't name names, but a lot of people who work in healthcare, they've got the right intentions. Intent. Their heart's in the right place. They really don't know what to do. They know it's an issue. They know something needs to be done. And I don't. And it's like I don't have an answer for them.
mm,
I don't. And I just thought I'd have more questions, but I don't have to have the answers. I just need to know which questions to ask and bring on good people to answer them. Especially
absolutely.
yourself. I constantly was like, actually, one of my you've been in a bunch of my events, and I remember you started off as a panelist, and now you're a host. And oh, by the way, we're going rambling. I told myself, sorry, I promised I wouldn't ramble, consciously. But
All good.
we're at the 5-minute mark. We should get the show on the road. Did you want to say anything else before we started?
No, I'm really excited to hear from our speakers. So let's get cracking.
Okay. I'm going to bring on our first Sigrid. And I think people who've been on my LinkedIn. Hello.
Hi.
And I think most people here have, they know you from LinkedIn. You've been in one of our previous events and put clips of you on my LinkedIn channel, but not everybody knows who you are.
No.
So, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm Sigrid. I'm originally Norwegian, now living in the Netherlands. After having worked in hospitals myself and healthcare organizations, I got very frustrated with how it took, how healthcare functioned, how it worked, and how we prioritized in our hospital. For instance, I had to prioritize money over the patient, which really frustrated me and really was against everything and the reason why I went into the healthcare in the first place. A bit by coincidence, I came into health tech and I realized, oh, but actually many of the challenges that we had in our hospital could be solved with technology. And now bringing on top this new layer with AI, now we're propelling it. Now we can really talk about how technology can improve patient treatment, how it can improve how healthcare professionals are also working, how they're functioning, what they're doing in their work. Because the fact is that many of healthcare professionals as well, they're spending a lot of time behind the computer instead of with a patient. So yeah, currently I'm helping healthcare organizations to understand what AI is, how technology can help, both with education, but also supporting their processes and figuring out where it would make sense to use different type of technologies to improve their processes. And I'm very excited to be here with you guys today and yeah, answer your questions and discussing the topic of trust, because I think that's a very important topic.
Oh, fortunately, I've got an AI that says you're on mute. It reminds me about thank you so much for that, Sigrid. I think, one of the things I like about this, I come from a tech background and I moved into this, is people are so passionate and they're kind of outcome, and it's not just about the money or the technology, it's that human element, and people are um, it's very inspiring actually. And should we get to the questions? I have first question. Whatever I say, I feel like a game show host when I say that, but
I'm happy to dive in with a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Sigrid. So, Sigrid, you used the term supporting processes, and I wondered, to support a clinician, and I'm a physician by background, so I understand this innately. To support a process, you have to gain the trust. I wondered your experience that had been, and
relevant stakeholders. I think where the management have said, okay, we're going to put in a tool, whether it's AI tool, another tool, and it's just been come from top down. Okay, we're going to use this tool, but no one really took the time to talk to the healthcare professionals, whether it's physicians, nurses, or others, how their work life is, how their processes are. And then you come there and you kind of force a tool on because now it's already bought, it's been purchased, we're going to use this. And people on the work floor, they don't understand why. Why are we doing this? Why are we using this tool? Because how we used work before was working. It worked fine. So you have to, one, involve people on the floor before implementing, just in the decision process. What type of challenges are we having? Involve them early on, but also involve them in the implementation process. Because you also have examples where tools, I heard about one company or organization, like hospital, that used, I'm not 100% sure what that tool did, but it was an AI tool. And the nurses spent 15 minutes additional per patient with this tool. And it's like, okay, cool, you use AI, but what's the point of it? Because your old process worked. The new process takes longer time. It doesn't necessarily give you a higher quality of treatment or care. So why are we doing this? So it's really important to consider who are the relevant stakeholders, who do we need to involve, what are their needs, and this is one thing if you're implementing a tool, but also think if someone's selling a tool, that is also important. So from the tech perspective, I've also worked with from software companies myself, trying to figure out what are the needs from the users. So the ones developing, the ones promoting a tool also need to understand what does the company in front of me need, and really dive deep into the core of the needs and the challenges they're facing.
I must agree with that in terms of building out the user profiles. And so that example of the nurses, perhaps what are their interests beyond the care that they know they're delivering excellently? It might be around protecting them in a medical legal capacity, and appealing to those interests as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, on that also, I also think that we also need to address that the wants would be different from the different stakeholders, right? And that's one of the things you mentioned the nurses that were on strike.
Yeah.
And if it's the case, I thought, well, because AI tools are being used, you also need to answer your question yourself, like, why are they doing that? Is it because, one, are they afraid that AI is taking over, taking over their job? Are they afraid, what is it? Maybe that they need to do more in shorter time? Like, what is the reason why a tool is being implemented? Is it so that the nurses, for example, can spend more time with the patients? Or is it so that the nurses can have more patients in the same time? Because those are two very different incentives. And those incentives will not always work, right? So having everyone on board that we're actually going for the same goal, so the manager on the same line as the ones using the tool.
Brilliant, thank you.
Hey, I'm gonna ask a question. And can we do a question about training? And the reason why I was going to get to this with you later, but I want to bring it up first, Sigrid, is that I don't know, people in the United States don't know this, but in Europe we have the AI Act, and there is mandated training that must be in place for companies using AI, especially in high-risk scenarios. There's like, I don't know, 7% revenue fine, the upper limit. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but February 1st, this legislation comes into effect. So a lot of organizations have to train their employees.
Yeah.
And what kind of, and it's quite a bit actually. I've spoken to people in these organizations. They haven't had the training yet. I can tell, they don't know the difference between NLP, machine learning, and Gen AI. Oh, it's like, are you supposed to know all this by, you get 8 days to be taught all this? They don't know. The training hasn't been done. What kind of training strategies should healthcare employ to kind of increase the worker confidence, but also proficiency with AI so they can actually meet these requirements?
Yeah. Well, first of all, start thinking about this today already for the healthcare organizations if you already haven't. Understand that the deadline. You need to start giving the training. That's just the facts because the EU AI Act and that part of the EU AI Act is coming in next month, which is already in 1.5 weeks. So training, I think. One of the when I've talked about this, it's been like, yeah, but healthcare organizations and healthcare professionals, they're so busy already. How can they even, start over getting this oversight? First, I would say the users of the AI tools should be trained first. Right. So if you have those, if you kind of put it into layers, who are actually using it right now? Because not everyone who's on the work floor are using these AI tools. So try to sort out, okay, who's using it now and who needs to be using it soon, or you need to be involved one way or the other. I would recommend having some basic training, so foundations, so basic AI literacy, awareness of and the limitations of AI and the risks of using AI, but also the potential. And then you could have some type of advanced education for specific groups, because not everyone needs to know everything, because then you're just going to be gone for training for 2 days or 2 weeks just to understand everything. But having these type of specific tailored courses for specific groups. And this is also, so who should be giving what type of training, but also per product, there should be trainings given. So should that come from the hospital, or should that come from the company who's actually producing this? I think the latter, because they really know how to use the product. Product-specific training for each AI technology, which you can have different type of trainings. You can have on-site trainings. And I would recommend then for a hospital as well to think about, multiple on-site trainings so that the healthcare professionals can also choose when it fits them. Preferably, or a suggestion is to have it just after a shift ends or just before a shift starts, so that you can have as many as possible there. But you can also have online or recorded trainings for the flexibility. But also after one day training, it's not finished. So you can't just have 1 day training. I already know it. People forget, though 90% is forgotten. So also from this webinar, sadly, but after I don't know 6 months, you can have a refresher, right? So what is it actually about? What do we need to be aware of? Maybe some discussion groups so that people really get it more ownership of the topic. And these training groups, so eventually that colleagues can train each other, because you can have someone who's really an expert on the topic.
Oh, by the way, I've been corrected. It's February the 5th is the deadline. Thank you, Brian, correcting me in the chat. Ekanjali, can we ask another question?
Yes, indeed. You touched on something very important, which is the responsibility of training and who does that lie with? And it might well be quite a nuanced conversation. Is it with the vendor? Is it with the client? And it sounds like what you're suggesting is we need to be upfront about that need, and that then requires a collaborative approach around that. But you mentioned actually the vendor and the provider of the solution, and the importance of them leading on the training initiatives. Can you go deeper into that and sort of your experiences around that?
When the providers lead the initiative?
Yeah, well, when the AI solution owner themselves, presumably they would know how to build components of it, what needs customization. So, and then that forms a lot of the after implementation, the training strategy. So that work in my experience has been challenging sometimes, because again, the lines are blurred and it requires that collaboration across the vendor and the client. So I just wanted to dive deeper on that really.
Yeah, so I am working with some organizations as well that do have their own software and program. And with that, we give trainings to their users. So I would give more general trainings. Okay, this is, what AI is. These are the risks. These are things to be aware of. And when it comes to the product itself, because I do not know the product, I cannot give training on the product because I don't know it, their ins and out. So that's how we've done it, is that we have this collaboration of it, so that I could give trainings and on, the general topic, the basic topic, or more in-depth of what we need to be aware of, while they give the trainings on their products. And that's a good way of collaborating, because I also don't want to give the training on different products because I cannot, and they don't want to give the training on the AI basics, because that should be given from the hospital. But the hospital also rarely, or the healthcare organizations rarely, have those skills in-house. So I think a collaboration there is great. Also, a good thing, many of these software tools, they also have online trainings. They have quite a lot of written video you name it, um, of, of ways that you can actually learn the product. But one of the risks is whether or not employees are following it. You know, you can. I have also like been had to follow these official trainings from companies, and you're like, okay, you're just pressing it like because you have to, and you're not that engaged. But if you're actually sitting there face to face with someone, it's a different type of training. It's more interactive.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So much, Sigrid. I'm going to bring on the next speaker.
Thank you.
And going to bring you on, Chris. And look at that. I think you've got the coolest background of any speaker we ever had on a webinar. And thank you so much, Chris. And I think a lot of people know Chris already. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I see that Chris is in your webinar. I see Chris is in your webinar." So, especially in the United States, but maybe on the European side, people don't know. Not everyone knows about you. So I wonder if you can introduce yourself.
Hold on here. For anybody who is saying, I see Chris is speaking, my heart right here. Don't make my head too big. But wow, that's really, really impressive, and I'm really thankful for that introduction. And I'm thankful to be here. And I looked, I think there was like 1,000 something people registered for this. So wow, what an amazing event and topic. Myself, I work at a company called Wobot right now in the healthcare data science capacity. And that's been the focus of my career for the past 5 years, is not just the work on algorithmic approaches to understanding human relationships as people seek care, but also from an organizational perspective, once we identify these algorithms and approaches that work well, that deliver a certain degree of accuracy, well, what are some of the social implications behind what we're doing? And when we look beyond those top line metrics and levels of performance, what do we start learning about how these approaches might impact underserved groups, minorities, on gender lines at the intersection there? These are all things that we start asking deeper questions once we work on these things. Background, like right now working with Wobot also because of the work that I did, the team that I supported in responsible AI at my previous company. I'm also a fellow for the NYU McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy Research as their health equity and healthcare strategy fellow, health equity and healthcare AI strategy fellow. And the main point that I'm trying to make and trying to help with in 2025 is whether you code or don't code, whether you lead or you're a contributor, let's find our unique ways, especially like with that focus that this is a poverty policy research institution that has an AI hub, which is extremely exciting to me because are we using this stuff to sell ads? Like if we let the Googles of the world run things, then it's all about ad sales, but they're looking at it like, how can we use these technologies in a way that addresses norms and problems that underserved people have been experiencing for years. So I don't know if that covers what we're looking for.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I had somebody say to me today, Chris, and I think he was playing devil's advocate. Jose, what's wrong with Facebook Health? And I was like, nothing in theory, but there's people are there's some people want something else, but in terms of health, they don't want to be treated the same way as the way commercial, they don't want to see what's happened in the past 10 years in big tech companies that treated the social media space and that information space. They don't want that happening in healthcare, and they want something different. But and I think people, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate that. Now, I want to actually take this back a little bit to the product people. I want to ask, and the reason I'm asking you the question, Chris, is I've had product people reach out to me via DM, and their heart's in the right place. They're talking to their users, talking to marketing, they're talking to engineering, they've got clinical support teams, and they're in the middle of the trust question. And they have a really hard time. They're like in a twilight zone because these groups don't necessarily talk to each other. They are talking to each other, but they don't necessarily speak the same language. So users don't necessarily, they're not able to say, well, they're not able to specify technical requirements that the engineering team is going to pick up on and institute. And they don't really, so what do product people that are kind of in the middle, what advice would you have for them?
Gosh.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes all the sense in the world. Do you see the smile on my face? Like product people are in an extremely powerful and privileged position. There's a huge amount of potential from taking and understanding the needs and concerns of the market and partnering with the engineering team to understand the technical roadmap to how we solve the problems. I think earlier we were talking about we dropped the word responsible AI, right? Like, and we know that term, and like I've spent a big chunk of my career helping a team to identify and mitigate bias in machine learning algorithms. But the algorithm, the method of identification and prediction, is only one component of any healthcare solution. It can't all be on fixing algorithms. It can't be all be on improving the accuracy score of a model if the delivery mechanism, to Sigrid's point, if the delivery mechanism isn't aligned with what nurses, physicians, social workers, clinicians, whoever you're building for, patients, if it's not aligned with what they're trying to do, then what good is accuracy? So I think product people are in a great position to understand those market needs, work tightly with clients, with their commercial teams, but also the engineering team to make sure that, hey, are we building extremely accurate algorithms that have no function, get no adoption, or are we solving for the problems that our clients, patients, and end users have? I want to give an example. There's a learning institution out there. I don't know if everybody's familiar, but it's called Out of Pocket Health. Follow them for some of the funniest healthcare memes in the world, but like it goes deeper. There's some colleagues of mine who went through the AI training session there, and I wanted to. I've got some serious FOMO. I rarely get FOMO, but I got FOMO for what they were doing there. Like, yeah, I've been working in AI since 2018. So I have a good understanding of a lot of the technical part of it. And hey, I do a lot of research on what's going on in value-based care and healthcare and things like that. But one of my coworkers, Leanna Leahy, shout out if you're on the call. But she comes back from this training with all sorts of ideas, not just from the training itself and the syllabus and the course material itself, but the connections, the fellowship, the people who are also deeply interested in being leaders on this topic. So she's getting insights from other organizations who are solving other kinds of problems, seeing those parallels and bringing those back to Wobot so we can be smarter about how we address problems. So that I just wanted to give a shout out to that and just give a kudos to people who dedicate their lives to learning and understanding the requirements of the market and how to translate that into something that engineers can be inspired by too. You muted, my friend.
I'm on mute again. What will I ever learn? I can't. You want to feel there's a question about Wobot in the chat?
Well, oh my gosh, what did I say?
Oh no, you're not in trouble.
Okay.
Sorry. What types of strategies does Wobot use? Do you want to speak as a representative of Wobot? What kind of strategies can you use to serve the less privileged?
Powerful question. That's the type of question that we should be asking about how we use algorithms and how we use these approaches in general. The basic idea behind Woebot, the mission, is radically accessible care. Well, radically accessible mental health support. And the basic idea for those who know what it's an app that once you download it, it's a chat bot that uses techniques that are inspired by cognitive behavioral therapy and other means such as DBT and IPT to address the needs that it can in the moment. So if people have challenges or issues, they're going through hurting, grief, pain in some kind of way, then there's something that they can talk to. And currently, this isn't something that's powered by a probabilistic method. We have content teams, clinical leadership that have collaborated together to say that given these scenarios, given what people are presenting with, here is the type of psychoeducation content or help in the moment that we want to offer. So that's the phase that we're in right now. And like some of the considerations that we're focused on are taking mental health support and addressing it in a way that is accessible to people that don't have a huge amount of education in psychology and taking all, there's all these scientific texts and manuscripts, but Woebot makes it fun and engaging and personal. And that sounds like a roundabout answer, but really what I'm trying to focus on is we should, like, the solutions that we deliver shouldn't require a huge amount of health literacy at the table. That's a social determinant of health. And if we're putting too much burden on our users, then we have a problem. In addition to that, as people have conversations with this tool, we notice that 70+%, 74 to 77% of the conversations happen outside of the hours that they'd be able to speak directly to a clinician. And in those conversations, overall, just with broad analysis over those conversations, we see a lot of issues around relationships and financial concerns and things like that, all kinds of things that are related to things around social determinants of health. So as you open up the door to conversations that otherwise never would have happened, you're learning things about your patient base potentially that you otherwise wouldn't have known. So seeing how people respond to the applications that you put into the market, you should pay attention to what's happening there and see if there's an opportunity to open up resources and considerations for opening up channels around addressing the social determinants of health and financial needs and concerns that you learn about from a patient population. So I'm speaking in parallel on like personal experience and what we as a team focus on, but like natural language processing and language models and everything like that, that flips people's thinking in a lot of ways to where, hey, let's start opening the doors for free text. And once you have more opportunities that you're collecting free text, it's important to not discard that data, but understand it deeply and understand where you can use that to address the social needs in your population. Muted again. Somebody doesn't want you talking.
I've used Woebot too. It's brilliant, actually. And I was like, I don't want to talk to a therapist. I don't want to put things in Google. But Ekanjali, do you have anything you wanted to say in response? Chris,
well, no, I'm so happy that we're discussing this topic. And Chris, you've spoken very eloquently on the strategies around this. And I love that concept of actually the workflows inspiring the engineers. And that then enables actually the solution itself to be highly implementable because you've done that outreach to begin with. So no, thank you. That was a really engaging conversation.
And thanks for zooming in on inspiring engineers too, because I've noticed that, if like folks, the time that you spend learning on a particular coding paradigm is time that you might not have available then after you use that time to learn this coding process, then you have less time to learn about the business of healthcare in general. So there is a trade-off, and if you're in product, you want engineers maximizing that coding capability. Like you want them understanding these frameworks that are going to deliver the best experiences. And there's just nothing better than if you've given them the space to be the best performant at where they want to do, so that like we of course want everybody learning the business of healthcare, but we don't necessarily want that to be a 100% requirement. But yeah, we want a world where we can open up engineers to be inspired to do their best work when they know that there's a purpose, and when they can look out into the world and see how people are responding positively to their application. That's not going to happen if they were building to problems that nobody actually had.
Indeed, very much.
Engineers are people too.
Dang it.
Engineers are people too. I work with sales and marketing a lot, so we like to complain about them, but they are people too.
I saw that on your last webinar. I saw that. I came here in defense of engineers.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity, Jose. And
Muted.
Oh, when will I ever learn? Now we're back in Europe. Hello, Rocco.
Hello, Jose, and thanks for this opportunity.
I think you're the this is the first time, and actually you haven't appeared on the webinar channels before. You've not appeared in any clips. And do you mind introducing yourself to the audience and your background?
Certainly. So I am Rocco Barone. I'm Italian, living in Spain, and have lived in several different countries, also outside of Europe. I am a consultant and a mentor in innovations in medtech. What I'm doing is that I'm helping innovative ideas and startups with their strategy and their commercialization. And I'm also an advisor for capital ventures companies and for AI project management, a mentor for some European institutions and universities. Basically, what I'm doing is that I make sure that the best innovations in medtech reach the patients and they are properly implemented.
I'm not muted this time.
Indeed.
And you know, at the beginning of the call, me and Ekanjali, we were talking about the kind of like the uncertainty of political landscape, but there's also uncertainty in the technology landscape. And even people who are on the technical end, they won't know necessarily where this technology is going to go a year from now. And I know you consult with a lot of companies. How do people innovate and bring new solutions to market, and at the same time building trust when there's all this uncertainty in terms of where are regulations going to be? Are there going to be guardrails? There's political dimension, and then there's technological uncertainty. And people are trying to innovate and build trust at the same time. What kind of advice would you give to people?
Definitely. Also, as people say, the only constant is change, and well, that's particularly relevant for AIs and for these innovations that I constantly see appearing in medtech. So the advice there is to stay agile, to be able to be flexible, not just with the products, particularly also with the teams behind those products. And I see it a lot in plenty of startups and companies not being able to process that change into their businesses. I would advise also to foster partnerships with the ecosystem. It's not an alone player most of the times, particularly for these huge projects. And I would say to follow their visions, the visions of how it is going to be useful for the final patient, user, hospital. This allows to follow a track of innovations. Now, Sigrid before mentioned that in involving the stakeholders early, that's a particularly important place. And referring also to Chris, that he was talking about the engineers, definitely putting the engineers next to the doctors, next to the patients. That allows to keep listening, to keep receiving this feedback. There's a trend that certainly is not going to disappear, that the society will have and is already having certain needs, and allowing to solve real problems, real world problems, and addressing those needs certainly will be the recipes for success. Of course, this is happening through not just by going on the internet or using some online tools. Certainly, it is about observing the everyday job. And this is also done through experts, through consultants that allow this to easily happen. Well, ultimately, I guess this is also a matter of trust, right? When a institution, a university, a hospital is acquiring a solution, is a matter of trust, trusting that this process, this product, this company is implementing a useful solution, is useful, not just solution per se, it's solving a problem that they have. And ultimately, this is a relationship-based business.
Thank you. See, I'm not on mute. Do we ask a question from the audience? Or did you have a follow-up question, Ekanjali?
Yeah, I mean, so many pearls of wisdom, Rocco, there. I could quote you and apply it to my life, probably. Follow the vision. So it's again around being visionary and developing trust as you're developing that vision is the challenge, right? So your advice were around staying agile, staying flexible. Is that so you can pivot if your understanding is incorrect, and so you can adapt as the needs adapt? Can you explain why staying agile is a key component of trust in this area?
Certainly. Well, there's particularly in the AI, well, we have all observed how much fuss there is about it, and how many companies, new businesses, new ideas, new projects are appearing in the market, in the ecosystem. Staying agile allows to catch all the ideas from this ecosystem and elaborate to make a consistent offering of products or systems for the cure of the patients. So staying agile means that it's about, I was saying, a partnership before, about listening to the feedback, about solving a real problem that exists. It's not just the technology per se for itself; it's the technology for people. That's what, in my opinion, is being able to be agile.
Technology for the. I love that.
Yes, particularly in a webinar for health AI, user trust, and social currency.
Yes, very much for the people, by the people.
Yeah. This is still a people word, so yes, let's make it.
We haven't actually spoken about social currency yet, and just so people in the audience, social currency is the reputation of the entire ecosystem, and what it means. And this is actually the very first question we got. We opened the chat. was about the announcement yesterday. And he was asking, what do you think about it? Today, we have Viva Europa, Hoy Más de Nunca, and a lot of people are wondering, are Europe and the United States going different? I don't really want to speculate on that, but I'm wondering if you could speak to the reputation, Rocco, of the whole the health AI ecosystem, and what does everyone's part play in terms, not just in terms of the people they're talking to. Do they have a responsibility to the entire ecosystem? And does that matter? Why do they care about it? And what does it mean?
Excellent question, Jose. Wow, that's a powerful one. So indeed, there's this enormous fear about AI. It's well, in a lot of movies you can see that, and there's a lot of speculation around it as well. And I have to say that here the recent regulations allow this to be in a more safe, in a more safe ground when implementing such systems, particularly for the healthcare. Also, in in all my career, I have seen that, particularly in Europe, this happens. The players, the healthcare providers, they do take care of the data privacy, of the GDPR, of the all the regulations around it. So, there's an enormous fear, and on the other side, there's someone who protects. Right? There's also the European Union is taking care of it. Now, regarding the reputation that you were saying, reputation of the AI per se, there's certainly an opportunity of, well, I mean, we see it every day. There's a new system that comes out that solves another problem, cancer treatment, in radiology, in cardiology. There's a lot of different AI out there that have a lot of potential. And so optimizing, using such potential is necessary at this point where we are progressing in healthcare. On the other side, we should mitigate the risks of such implementations through not just regulations, but certainly there is a role, as you were saying, as innovators in an uncertainty or in an uncertain landscape. There is certainly a role of responsibility there as well.
And so I think do you have another question, Ekanjali? I think we've got there's a whole bunch of questions in the chat I haven't actually asked yet. But
yeah, let's have a look at the chat.
there's a lot of them are comments. I have let's see. I think we got one more. No, they're comments. People talking to each other. I don't know if they're questions.
I wonder, Rocco, if I may ask, social currency, and let's take a bit of a deep dive on that, right? What do we mean by social currency? We mean, certainly my understanding is how we're presenting and positioning AI as a tool of empowerment and societal improvement, and the currency that we need to build within this community around that. Is that your understanding of what social currency is in this landscape? And you've mentioned reputational element of AI. Are there other ways of engaging and driving up that currency, be it using healthcare personnel as advocates, really putting ethical and human-centric values at the crux of AI, as opposed to just profit and revenue? So, yeah. Can you kind of sort of deep dive on that for me?
Certainly, very interesting question as well. So I intend social currency in several different aspects, simply and in a very materialistic view as well. Social currency is the value that each of us has as a patient, as healthcare data, and that there is some value behind that, and that's exactly what this webinar is about, right? Where do you put those data to be to be trusted, right? Not to be manipulated. Social currency also means from my understanding, um, our own value in terms of our actions as people, right? You were saying about leadership into putting an innovation to AI. That's, from my understanding, also what it is, our value, our currency, right? There's reputational. You were saying about it. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects into this. I like particularly the word social currency.
It's a
It
great
is
term. Yes. Yeah.
it is very very new, very intriguing as a term. I have not heard it so much, but as soon as this webinar came out, I said, "Wow, interesting." So yeah, plenty of different aspects into this.
I think it's an important metric that we keep bringing up around AI growth in this sector as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rocco.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we're going to go now. Actually, our next speaker. Hello, Jody. I'm going to introduce you a little bit, and then I'll let you speak.
Okay.
Jody is actually the inspiration for the title, and the last webinar as well. And I think I connected with Jody a couple of months ago. I can't remember, and he wrote a white paper on health, AI, and trust, which I used to kind of build out the not just these webinars, but also lots of the video content that I do on my LinkedIn. And it's actually been transformative, that white paper, because I mean, 2,000 people signed up for webinars over a 6-week period over Christmas, and it's like I said to Jody, it's not because I'm a really good looking guy, it's because the subject resonates, and now I know a lot more about it. And I want to say thank you, Jody. You really, really helped me on this journey I've been on. And I'm going to let you speak now. And not everyone here knows you, so that'd be a good time to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jose. So my background, I'm sort of a hybrid public health social scientist. Started out working in global health and human rights, worked in Rwanda after the genocide, in Bangladesh, working with Grameen Bank. And those were really interesting training grounds to think about trust and social capital when you have a society implode on one hand, and then on the other hand, with like Grameen Bank getting finance to the poorest of the poor in Bangladesh, the success of Grameen Bank depended on social capital and trust. Because they got like very high repayment rates for their loans without requiring collateral the way normal banks do. So my interest in trust and thinking about trust goes back quite a long way. And then I worked with Futures think tank, heading or co-leading their health practice, and got to think a lot about risk, uncertainty, and innovation. And effectively, when we think about trust, it's that bridge between uncertainty and risk. We will take a risk on something or people if we trust them. If we don't, we won't take risk to adopt that technology over time. And I think thinking about trust in that broader context, and often we use the term, but sort of defining it tends to be rather nebulous because it's not a thing. And over the last 15 years or so, I've worked with a lot of different startups, everything from medical devices to health data and social determinants of health, and was an analyst covering AI for Chilmark Research for, starting back in 2016. And prior to that, working with a group of sort of a co-op of ethical machine learning folks, really saw how this need to think about trust was becoming central to how we even think about innovation. If you look at, Alibaba in China, the innovation wasn't first an online shopping space. It was getting the trust of people to go on the platform to begin with. Airbnb, um, getting strangers to rent a room in your house had to get people over that trust hurdle for Airbnb to take off. Google's Sidewalk Labs failed in Toronto because this whole discourse around surveillance capitalism and AI and top-down big tech companies got the best of them. So these are the types of things I've been looking at over the years when I started writing that paper, and why I thought trust was so important and going to be a critical component for success or failure in health AI.
I want to ask you, I have a couple of questions I want to ask you. But I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about, and just expand on what you just said about the nature of trust in society, how it impacts healthcare, and bring AI into the picture.
Okay. Sure. I like to go back to Nicholas Luhmann, who wrote a book on trust and power that's used a lot by social scientists. And he says trust is the confidence in one's expectations that a poor outcome will not happen. And if a poor outcome happens, who's going to be held accountable? So in effect, often we hear, if you scroll through LinkedIn, we see all this talk about I trust in AI or not. I trust in the technology. But in reality, we're trusting in the people in the institutions who are using AI. It's not the technology purely in and of itself. It's that assemblage of the human and the technology and that accountability function. And I think one of the reasons why that issue of accountability is so important is, if we think about sort of the history of trust and what's been going on in society over the last 20, 30 years, we had these traditional ways of trusting authority figures. You trusted your doctor or your priest, a certain politician or leader of a social group or whatever. And then the internet comes along and everything becomes more distributed and dispersed, and we have our filter bubbles. And, on top of that, then we had the whole Facebook controversy with the election and misinformation, disinformation, and all of that. So that's that broader ecosystem that healthcare is nested in that, with all of this noise and misinformation, disinformation, and good stuff and bad stuff, and so forth. So who do we trust? And I think that's a lot of the problems we're finding in society is go back to that, this transition from centralized to distributed trust. And, how do we manage that as companies? And then, we've seen, that what initially started out as an academic text on surveillance capitalism with Shoshana Zuboff. Now that people feel and experience that all the time, which is why the public rebelled in Toronto to some degree against Google's Sidewalk Labs. And then, and actually a good healthcare example is, last month when there was the shooting of the United Healthcare executive, and he's treated as a hero by a large percentage of the public. And the issue is why. And you look at there is a direct link to AI in that equation. When you look at United Health was under investigation for using AI to automate prior authorization denials. And that has kind of crystallized a lot of the bad sentiments about the healthcare system in the US. You have this, this event that just looks, on the surface just as a murder, and then all of these realities of US healthcare get kind of brought into explaining, in some cases, people using that to justify that because there's this rage against the system for, parts of the system for some things that they do. And so I think that that brought home the reason why I think, trust has been neglected quite a bit in healthcare. And so we've seen a lot of other data points too with, for example, Epic had an algorithm for early sepsis detection that missed more than 66% of the cases, I believe. Optum had these are all big players in the healthcare systems pushing algorithms out too soon, and they have a negative impact. And that's one of the things in healthcare we have to be very careful about. You can harm individuals and communities with an algorithm, but how do you repair that harm once it's done? So I think, really thinking seriously about what are the practices and policies that we're going to put into place for trust by design from the get-go and all the way through the life cycle of the models we're using. And not only thinking about efficiency and productivity, because efficiency can also be the enemy of trust. You push it out too soon without testing it and localizing your model on local data, and then it doesn't work and harms someone. That's a bad thing. So I don't know if I answered your question fully, but.
That was brilliant. I want to ask you a question, and this is almost coming from me and the people I've been talking to, my personal life, and I've also gone. I spent some time on Blue Sky. The whole conversation about health AI on Blue Sky is a lot different than what you hear on LinkedIn, and people want to have a voice. Now, I think there's this sense that choices made in healthcare with respect to AI over the next couple of years are going to cast a long shadow. We're going to be living with it for a while. But a lot of people, they don't know necessarily how to articulate what it is they want. They're just reacting to negative news stories and saying yes, no, yes, no. What advice would you have for, and also there's people who want to, like, I've spoken to people who want to create communities who not necessarily do futurism, but they want to advocate for some kind of technological future for healthcare, but they don't have a solid grasp of how to articulate that, where to start, how to express themselves. What advice would you give to people like that?
I mean, we don't have a lot of good examples of, because, right now, most of the, AI, especially in healthcare, tends to be very concentrated in a few big companies, and I think this is one of the problems we're facing with generative AI. When you have models that cost $1 billion to train, you can't even get startups even close to that. Or, originally a lot of work came out of academia and then was spun off as startups and companies that take the academic research and then turn it into a product in a company. But even academic institutions are getting sort of squeezed out in the generative AI space when the cost of training a model, and like, how do you bring in other voices? And I think that this has been one of the problems I see, is that often when you want to talk about having a process that builds trust and creates accountable AI, it slows things down a bit. If you're not just flag waving for responsible AI and say, yeah, we did it after the fact, but you're doing it up front the whole way through the life cycle, and looking at, okay, when we trained this model and then we ran the model on a local data set, and we're looking at the benchmarks for performance, and it doesn't, maybe we find, okay, it's not performing as well on this class of people versus that class of people. And we have to go back and, tweak the sensitivity and specificity and so forth, or, whatever other aspects of that model. And we start including other stakeholders into that process, that starts to get kind of scary. But in reality, it's going to be the the secret sauce to making good models that last over time and having those, the ML ops that responds to these performance breakdowns and lack of portability of models and things like that. But I think, I've seen some examples of using citizen juries, citizen assemblies to talk about AI. And, if you look at some of the more, I guess, bottom up or progressive smart cities programs around the world, you could look at some of them as having more participatory processes as stakeholders. But, clinical healthcare, I think getting some of the patient groups and patient advocates and things like that involved, and even just like, if you're doing trust by design with your whole team, in my mind, that would mean you should really talk to the salespeople. What are they hearing about your product as well, and integrating those insights early in to the design of new models. If you go back to the Moog synthesizer, that innovation came about because engineers talked to the salespeople, heard what end users were, what their problems were with the product, and took it back to the engineers, and they ended up creating the Moog synthesizer, which is, incredibly valuable and important innovation in the music industry. And it came about through those conversations.
Got one final question, but you want to
Chris.
I've got a question. So many, Jody. Some really difficult questions I think you've raised that we should be asking in this area. Who will be held accountable? Who do we trust? How do we repair the harm if it's already been done? And how do we implement trust as a component by design? These are excellent questions, and I'm a solutions-based person. Can you explore some of the avenues that we can look around implementing trust by design? Well, how can we mitigate for some of these questions? Who do we hold accountable in the structure as we're designing some of these solutions? What are the answers to some of these really key questions?
Yeah, I think so I'm involved with one startup right now in the healthcare space where we're thinking very seriously about how to implement all of this. And, the framework we're using is largely under the ML ops, but then having individuals attached to the, being accountable and then collaborating collectively throughout the life cycle of a model. So more abstract general approach, that's the approach we're following there. I don't know if we have time to get into all the details on that, but starting out up front with interdisciplinary teams that also include your stakeholders, clinicians, and if you can get patient groups and so forth in, like, are we framing the problem the right way? Is that a problem that we once solved downstream? You see a lot of things we're using AI just because we can, versus we have a problem that it's a good match to. And I think that's one of the first mistakes I've seen quite a bit of stuff like the hammer in search of a nail problem. So rather than taking that approach, what are the problems we want to solve? What do the different stakeholders think about the approaches? And then how do we then design that throughout, getting the training data to, the benchmarks for the models, and, on down the line to, like, when do we ultimately decide to retire a model? Who decides that, and under what criteria? So there's a lot of, you can find lots of literature out there in the ML space that gives you like the tools to do that. And there are some case studies in the white paper. One of the more interesting case studies that I learned a lot from was UC Health in Colorado was working on a sepsis algorithm, and initially they got a lot of false alarms. And so they began by tweaking the sensitivity and specificity of the model, and that got them, that solved part of the problem. But then they realized it wasn't purely an issue about the model, but it was the design of the surveillance of sepsis. And so what they did is they created a kind of war room where they had a clinician, like an MD clinician and a nurse. And often it was like a nurse that maybe had a back injury being on the wards and needed to be off the wards, but could be in this war room. And so the alarms went to the war room first. Then, the physician and the nurse could say, well, is this a false alarm or not? And then route that out to the appropriate clinician when needed. And so that ended up working very well. If you look at the numbers they had, the lives saved, the cost savings, and all of that were very impressive. And I think that one, in my mind, is one of the best case studies. And then there's a paper by Data and Society on the sepsis algorithm used at Duke that is largely viewed as very successful, but they found that the burden of disruption was placed, very, very heavily on the shoulders of nurses rather than doctors. So there's still some work that needs to be done so that, it's not the burdens of implementing and adopting the new technology are not so heavily borne by certain clinicians over others, or, you could have admins as well that are overworked. Now, I mean, the whole ecosystem, there's a, burnout problem.
Okay, I want to ask you about principles, certifications, standards, frameworks, seals of approval. These are important, but I think if I was to ask you, is ticking all those boxes enough? It's not finished when you do all that.
I think, the frameworks that, have proliferated around responsible AI, they're fine, they're important, but the problem with principles is they tend to be abstract and you have to then translate them into practice. And so for that piece, on, let's say, validation, we see in the US, the Coalition for Health AI, CHAI. There are several different bodies. Health AI Partnership has a framework for validating on local data and so forth. So we're seeing industry come together, come up with standards for validating and verifying and having that kind of, seal of approval from those bodies. And I think that can go quite far, but you're still going to have to be vigilant and put into practice those, the adequate ML ops and, model ops and all of that to monitor performance, because AI is like a living, breathing thing. And as take if you take a model from off the shelf and apply it to a different population, generally in healthcare, you're going to have to do a lot of work for that model to work well on a population different from, what it was trained on. To me, sort of the ethics issues, the most important ones, you can come down from the mount with your 10 commandments, frameworks and principles. But then at the end of the day, people make decisions in their everyday life, and these are more emergent and so forth. So the ethics piece that matters, that I'm really interested in, is those decisions that a data scientist and that whole team has to make when they're looking at, let's say you have a model that you're deploying and you see you're not getting the same outcomes of that performance on a subpopulation, low income, a certain racial group, whatever. And you got to go back and you have to tweak that sensitivity and specificity or other, metrics that you use to evaluate the performance or evaluate your model. And there are always going to be trade-offs. It's not going to be clean. That it's like, oh, we're going to get it to work really well on that population, but then the overall performance may decline. How do we make those decisions? There's often not a clear-cut answer. But I think as an industry, if we begin sort of sharing our notes about how we make those decisions, it can really help further data science and the broader health AI world to take a closer look at this, sort of emergent ethics of automation. Anthropologists are studying this, but a lot of them are talking to other anthropologists. We need to have them in our health AI discussions, and we need to be talking to them because they have a lot of interesting insights. I learned a lot from some of my anthro colleagues and looking at, how ethics is emergent from the everyday practices of monitoring the models, and that there is no right answer. Often there can be, but sometimes it's a gray area. So we still have to make a decision, though, and that's what ethics is: making that decision. So what are our notes in how we make that decision that can help us all think through these things, because they're central to whether AI is going. It's the everyday pieces that can get us in the problem if we just turn our backs to them and don't take them seriously.
So true.
Thank you, Jody. And going to wrap up. Ekanjali.
Yeah, and I want to start off by sort of thanking the audience. You've asked some really great questions. We haven't had the opportunity to answer them all. So reach out to the speakers if I may be as bold as to suggest that. And these are industry experts that Jose has worked very hard to secure. And some of your questions are extremely specific and valuable. So continue those conversations. Our motive here is to try and build a community and increase the conversation in this space. So keep that conversation going. In terms of my roundup, so I'm going to start with Sigrid. And in fact, I'm going to start with a quote by Jody, which is, "Trust is the bridge between uncertainty and risk." And I love that as a sort of starting point and setting the scene for this whole space. Sigrid started with the process of supporting the processes in health AI and using the top-down approach with the relevant stakeholders to double down on what they are and make sure that we aren't forcing the tool just because it's bought. And we're actually understanding what the value of it is in that chain. She also touched upon the on-site training requirements and the collaborative and nuanced approach around the vendor and the client and the work that needs to be done to have the correct training type and modules as part of that. Chris, very engaging, really enjoyed your conversation. You brought up the inspiration for the engineers as a key concept and using the workflows as a tool for that, which I'm going to shout out again because I loved. Rocco, your concept of following the vision and the staying agile, staying flexible as an important requirement of social currency, bringing up the reputational element that is important to consider in AI and how we can use the opportunities around that and develop the potential in that space. And finally, Jody, you said it first, and I really like it. Trust first, innovation later. And the case studies that you brought up around that, what looks good, so the examples around Alibaba, Airbnb, and where it hasn't worked, and players in the space that we can actually learn some lessons from. So we're already over. Thank you for your time. I've kept it brief this time, but a very enriching conversation, a very important one. And I'm really proud of this community for considering these important factors in the metrics of developing AI and implementing it and how we provide the most value to the communities that we serve.
Thank you, Ekanjali. And thank you again to all the speakers coming and everyone for coming. And if anybody's interested in building webinars and videos in the health AI space, tap me on the shoulder, up for a chat. I love doing this. I usually finish on time. I know we've gone 19 minutes over today. Thanks so much, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
See you at the next one.